speaker is from Chicago, and I just had a chance to meet her, and she's amazing. Her name is Denise Hansard, and she's an author, speaker, life architect, and an expert in transformation. Through her Southern style of storytelling, Denise shares how your story doesn't define you unless you choose for it to do so. She's coached hundreds of women to make six figures, find the love of their life, and get super healthy, all while having fun. She works with executives and entrepreneurs as she understands the big and small business worlds. She uses her passions for helping people become their best selves, however they define this, based on the sound foundation of her education, which is a master's in counseling and life coach certification, and 20 years of corporate experience. Please help me welcome Denise.
This. I'd like to start with a story. So once upon a time, there was a town where people came from their hearts. It was a land of possibilities for them. They were filled with joy and love. They laughed every day. They had smiles on their faces. They loved life. It was great, because they came from their heart. And then one day, a stranger came to this town. Now, this stranger was always thinking, always up in his head. He was analyzing everything that went on around him. He was analyzing every thought he had, every action that he did, everything that everyone else was doing at the same time. This stranger was in his head. Now, what did the townsfolk do who were filled with love in their heart and smiles on their faces? They go to the stranger and they welcome him, smiling, saying, "Hello, how are you?" And what does this do for the stranger who is thinking all the time? He shies away. It scares him because he doesn't know how to accept this kind of expression. This behavior was so strange to him because he's always analyzing everything. As a matter of fact, he shied away and he was thinking at the same time, what would make them want to welcome me? They don't know me. This is very strange for me, because he was so much up into his head. As time goes by, the townsfolk do what they normally do, and they continue to reach out to the stranger with love in their hearts and smiles on their faces. And the stranger continues to shy away from them because he still doesn't know how to accept this. He's trying to analyze why anyone would want to accept him into their life. Well, it was at that time that the townsfolk took a step back and they started thinking themselves, what's wrong with us? Why can't the stranger be our friend? And they made a choice. They decided that they needed to be more like the stranger, to begin thinking more like the stranger. And so they chose to leave their heart and start listening to their head. They became very head-centered. Now, some of you may be saying, Denise, this is great fun, but what the heck does this have to do with me? And I'm here to tell you that this story resides in all of us. We have that town within us where we always go into our heart and we sometimes go into our head, or is it vice versa? We're always into our head and sometimes into our heart. And we have those moments while we're up in our head that does one thing for us. It's looking to protect us, to keep us safe from whatever is going on in our world. And for me, that moment was 5 years ago. I was working in the corporate world. I was that person who had that stature. I had a stature of, I am a corporate person. 20 years into this world, I have worked my way up. I am that person, and I had that six-figure income to show that. And I was always into my head with this. There was something missing on the inside that I wasn't willing to address. I had felt it for many years. As a matter of fact, so many years that I kept jumping from job to job and company to company. And there was this one day that all of a sudden I knew my life was about to change. My boss was flying in from New York City to have meetings that day. He wanted to meet with me at the very end of the day. That's never a good time to meet with your boss. And I knew at that time that my life was changing, that I was about to lose my identity. And so all day long, I allowed the thoughts of what that would mean to me come to surface. I was getting into my fear and my thought of how can I lose this? I don't know who I am without this job. And as my boss came into my office and sat down in front of me, I can still hear the words today of him saying, "Denise, I have to let you and your whole team go." Well, as you can imagine, I'd already built up the scenario in my head. And so I did. I went directly to the fear. I went into my head. I started getting dizzy. I got lightheaded. And even the tears started coming to my eyes. And I was so into my head that all I could think was, what am I going to do? I've lost everything. I did get let go that afternoon. I lost that job. And then as I really settled into what was going on, I saw this as one of the greatest opportunities that I had, that I could go inside of my heart and begin to realize what was the passion that I had, what would I love to do? How could I live my life coming more from my heart and from my joy? And so I decided, okay, I have my master's in counseling, and I love to help people grow, so that's what I want to do more. I am a transformational life coach. I love that. I change lives. And so my heart was taking control and taking me down that path of where I could help serve and make others' lives better at that too. Or so I thought. Because you know, the universe has a way of having wake-up calls for us. And so I can remember one day in Chicago, it was cold, mid-November. My girlfriend and I were going out to have lunch. And I was so excited. I was telling her all about the certification program I was going through. It was just so much fun, and I was so excited for my next steps. And my cell phone rings. And I look. It's Brent. Brent, a previous boss that I loved working with, that had taken me to 2 different companies, that just called to say, guess what? I've got a job for you. And so what did I do? But my mind started kicking in, that head started kicking in, because that job, essence, was my comfort zone, that I knew. And guess what? He was saying, Denise, just come down. It's in Memphis. You'll be closer to Atlanta. You can get back closer to family. And oh, by the way, you're going to make 30% more than you've ever made, because I'm telling you the salary. And I could do this in my sleep, basically. So my mind started kicking in, writing down all the wonderful things that could happen to me. Even to the point that it was convincing my heart, oh, and by the way, go ahead, continue getting your certification, build that business on the side, sock that money away, and once you do it for another 5 years, because you could do this corporate work for 5 more years, right? Yeah. Then you'll have a thriving business the moment you retire from corporate. My mind had laid out all the ways in which it could work. Yeah. And I was going down that path. My boss said, come, do informational interviews. Just don't screw them up, Denise. The job's yours. I'm going, okay. And he said, oh, and by the way, while you're here, I'll go ahead and set you up with a real estate agent. You can just house hunt. So he started feeding that desire of the comfort of what I had known before in that corporate world. Timing is wonderful. I love timing and the way the universe has its hand in it, because it got delayed, which gave me time to allow my logical, wonderful, safe brain to quiet down so I could go into my heart. And my heart spoke to me in a way that only I could hear at that time. It made me physically sick to my stomach because it was screaming at me that this is not what you want to do. Every time I would think about going for those interviews, I would literally feel nauseated. That was my heart, my gut, my instinct that was screaming at me. And I was talking to my coach as I was going through the certification. I was telling her all about it, and all of a sudden my heart spoke to me and said out loud to her, I feel that if I take this job, I'm going to die on the vine. And I went, whoa, well, that was kind of interesting. And all of a sudden I realized I had to say no to that. I had to say no to the logical part of my brain that was saying yes, where what I really wanted was to follow my heart. I was given that opportunity, and this is what I wanted to do. So when we get that conversation going between the head and the heart, we have those moments that it can either be dread, worry, fear, or excitement that we think we want to follow. I mean, our head is telling us that, right? Yeah. And we listen to this part of our brain. We listen to these logical things, the analyzation, the pros, the cons, the list, do I, don't I? Do we all make those lists? Yeah. And so what I know is this, guys, life boils down to one thing, and that one thing is choices. As we have choices in every moment of our life. We have opportunities that come into our life each and every day that basically says, do you want to step into this? It could be that career step up the ladder. It could be starting your own business. It could be expanding your business. It could be going on that blind date. We don't know. These are some of the opportunities that come up for us. And what I do know is that most people feel like they have three choices when an opportunity comes up. They go yes and step into that choice and own it, even though they may be a bit fearful. Or they go, no, that's not for me right now, and they own that choice. Now, what typically happens with majority of people is they begin to waffle between the yes and the no. The yes and the no. Can I put you to sleep? The yes and the no. And what is really going on there, guys, is that you're unsure of what is happening because your head is saying one thing, your heart is saying another. There's a confusion there, and they're having an argument. Okay? And what happens with that when you're waffling between making a choice is the fact that that opportunity passes you by. And then you begin to blame people or circumstances because it didn't have anything to do with you. Well, I didn't have enough time to make a choice on that, a decision. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough knowledge. Why would you even think that I could go there with that? When in reality, there are two choices, guys. You step into it and you say, you know what, yes, this is for me. This is what I want to do. I am owning it. I am going for it. I don't care how fearful I can be. Or you say no and say, you know what, I'm going to own this too. Because I've listened to what my heart is telling me and it's not right. Or it's not right at this time. So life boils down to the choices that we have in life. So you're probably wondering, okay, Denise, how do we marry these two together if they're always in conflicting motions, you know? One saying yes, one saying no, yes, no, whatever. So I have a very 3 simple step process, and you've heard it today more than once, so it must be very important. So when you're getting up in your head, and let's address this first. Can you recognize the moments when the chitter-chatter monkey mind is going on? Okay? If you can remember and hear those moments, be observant of the time that your mind is having its own conversation of telling you, this is what we need to do. We need to say this step, this step, this step. As long as you can recognize that, more or less, you're probably putting yourself into a state of shallow breathing, so you're not thinking very clearly. But if you can recognize that portion, you want to hit the pause button. See a big red button in your head and hit the heck out of it. Just hit it, stop the chatter, and then breathe. 3 deep breaths. Okay? The time that you have paused your brain and you have begun to breathe is the moment that then you can consciously dip into your heart. Okay? And there's only one thing that you need to do from there, and that's to ask your heart a question. Because there is no question that we have that we don't already know the answer to. We just have to be willing to hear it. What would you love? What do you want? However you want to phrase that question. And then allow yourself to begin to hear the answer to it. It may not come easy the first time, and you may be very fearful about it or anxious. As you put this into practice, it gets easier to where all of a sudden you recognize that first, you're coming from your heart, making those heartfelt decisions. Your heart is then talking to the head saying, hey, head, let's go do this. And the head goes, yay, let me tell you how. Boom, 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 boom. And then it just goes and says, body, go do these things. To where all of a sudden you are designing your life from your heart. If you're still hearing the voices in your head and you're staying stuck there, that's you just being in fear, recognizing that you're afraid to move forward. You're in that comfort zone, what I call the comfort zone of pain, because it's what you know. And when we know something, we stay there, unless we choose to grow. So you've got the 3 steps. So remember the day my boss came into the office to let me and my whole department go. I want to tell you the rest of that story. So he flew in from New York, and he had had that flight over, and every hour of that day to go ahead and lay out his conversation with me. And I'm sure he already had it in his head. She's a female. She'll get emotional. She'll start crying. She may even beg me to keep her job, yada, yada, yada. We got that story. And he knew how to deal with that reaction. So as he told me, Denise, we got to let you and your whole department go, I did move into that. The dizziness, the lightheadedness, the tears coming. And I paused and took a breath. And I went into my heart. And I basically allowed my heart to finally have its voice. And I looked at my boss and I said, thank you. Thank you, as this is a blessing. Well, I'm telling you, it scared him to death so much, he got up, he ran out of the office and said, go see HR. So what I want you to do is to think about the process, pause, get unstuck. Take those deep breaths, drop into your heart and ask yourself, what do you want? Because that is truly what it's about, guys, to marry the heart and the head together. Your heart knows. Your brain wants to work in tangent with your heart to make this a simple and loving process along the way. And life does flow, and it flows very smoothly. Thank you, guys. I appreciate everything. And remember, will you marry me? Said the heart to the head. Only you can make that choice. Thank you.